The other thing that is worth noting is that as this crisis deepens, the petty bourgeois come to the fore with their slogans. Wouldn't it be nice to have a nicer model of capitalism? The ideologues of the petty bourgeoisie can never rise above the horizons of the class whose ideology they represent. They want capitalism, but a nicer capitalism. They want the market, but a nicer market. They want the banks, but nicer banks. Banks that care for people. They don't want greed to be there. Now take away greed out of capitalism, what are you leaving it with? Since the whole rationale for production under capitalism is to expand the surplus value produced by the laboring masses, which goes to the owners of the means of production. Now they're not doing it for reasons of altruism. They're doing it to make more and more money. Greed is built into the capitalist system. Greed is a virtue. You know, we are told that if this is the incentive for which you work, if you don't have that incentive, you won't. The workman works because he's threatened with unemployment and starvation. That's his incentive. But the capitalist only goes to work if you, every time he comes, you give him more and more of the surplus value produced by the workers. And I was quite amused reading an article by somebody who works for the London School of Economics. His name is Lord Richard Laird. And I'll give you a summarized version of what he said in an article that he wrote for the Financial Times. He says, despite massive wealth creation, happiness has not risen since 1950s in the US or Britain. So he seeks happiness. So accelerated economic growth is not a goal for which we should make the large sacrifices. We should not sacrifice the most important source of happiness, human relationships. At home, at work, and in the community. We have sacrificed too many of these in the name of efficiency and productivity growth. Now you think he's one of us. You'd be wrong. But listen to him. We treat private interest as the only motivation. Our society has become too individualistic, with too much rivalry and not enough common purpose. You think he's a collectivist? We idolize success and status and thus undermine our mutual respect. At school, children should learn that the noblest life is the one that produces the least misery. This rule should apply also in business and professional life. People should do work that is useful to society and does not just make profits. Now, if you apply this rule to capitalist society, 9/10 of production will simply disappear. Armament production. Things produced for a consumerist society, whether you need them or not. Economics should adopt a more realistic model of what makes human happiness and makes markets function. Of course, he earns his money under capitalism, his wallet is stuffed full of capitalist loot, and that's what he says. We do not want communism. As the research shows, communist countries were least happy in the world and also inefficient. Where does he get his ideas from? Is he connected with the world? Has he seen any communist country? But we need a more humane brand of capitalism based on better regulation and better value. So the mountain has delivered a mouse. We want happiness, we want more communal life, we just don't want to produce for profit, we want to do things which have a purpose, which have a meaning, which will induce respect, but we don't want communism. We want actually a humane capitalism. A humane capitalism is what becomes inhumane capitalism. And inhumane capitalism is what leads to not only unemployment, poverty and misery, it also leads to war and devastation. For our purposes, the solution we seek is this one, which is presented by Engels. The solution to the constant recurrence of the economic crisis can only consist in the practical recognition of the social nature of the modern forces of production, and therefore in the harmonizing of the modes of production, appropriation and exchange with the socialized character of the means of production. And this can only come about by society openly and directly taking possession of the productive forces which have outgrown all control except that of society as a whole. The social character of the means of production and of the product today reacts against the producers, periodically disrupts all production and exchange, acts only like a law of nature working blindly, forcibly, destructively. But with the taking over by society of the productive forces, the social character of the means of production and of the products will be utilized by the producers with a perfect understanding of its nature, and instead of being a source of disturbance and periodical collapse, will become the most powerful lever of production itself. And this is something that we have to impress on working people. This is what they need to do. And once working people understand that, these ideas will become a material force. In the words of Comrade Mao Zedong, once the correct ideas, characteristic of the advanced class, are grasped by the masses, these ideas turn into a material force which changes society and changes the world. Mao Zedong, where do correct ideas come from? To just show you the validity of the assertions I have made, I have got a table in front of me which represents various capitalist countries and the socialist Soviet Union between the years 1929 and 38. These were years of tremendous misery, unemployment, and war as far as capitalism was concerned. On the other hand, these were years of tremendous advancement in the Soviet Union. Years full of difficulty because of capitalist encirclement, but years also of tremendous opportunity, which the Soviet masses, under the banner of Marxism and Leninism and the leadership of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, took up. If you look at this table and you take the production of all these countries at 100 in year 1929, by 1938, that is the prelude to the Second World War, the USSR index had gone to 477, which is nearly, the Soviet economy had grown by nearly 5 times. The USA had gone down to 72, which means 10 years later, it was 3/4 of what the size of the US economy was 3/4 of what it had been in 2029. The UK economy was slightly better because of their monopoly at the time of colonies, and it stood at 112, but which means it only grew in those 10 years by something like 10-12%. Some of it would have been greatly contributed, as in the case of Germany, by preparations for the war. And German economy went to 125%, i.e. it grew by 25%, again because of war preparations, and the French one to 112. So Soviet Union was an oasis, an island, albeit a very large island, of prosperity and development and growth, surrounded by a world of misery, unemployment, destitution, where in capitalist countries the unemployment figure was anywhere between 20 to 25% of the laboring population. That's what was taking place, and that is why they hated the Soviet Union so much. And Soviet economy was more or less disengaged from the world market. Yes, of course they had trade, of course they bought things, of course this whole thing, but it didn't depend on its exports to be able to expand its production. It expanded its production because it satisfied the needs of its people. And the bourgeois economists have come to the conclusion that the 1929 depression only went away because of war. And they say, the one safe conclusion to draw, hopefully they add an irrelevant one. An unnecessary one is, war is good for business and for profits and for growth. So that's all they can think of. That if the system is going down, they plunge millions of working people into a huge holocaust which destroys 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million. To keep this out-of-date system going, the 20th century saw 2 great world wars, whereby 2 groups of imperialist bandits fought against each other as to decide which one shall control which share of the world's resources, markets, and avenues for investment. And 100 million people were lost in those 2 wars. not counting the tens of millions lost in local wars, which don't even register as wars. They just are wars waged by imperialism to shoot down and kill innocent masses of people, as in Afghanistan, as in Iraq, as in Palestine, as in Colombia, and several